Okay guys, so today we are going to be talking about how to perform a leg extension. What we're trying to target with the leg extension is obviously our quads. So what do we know about our quads? Well, our quads are 4 muscles with one that goes over 2 joints. Now, why is that important to us? Well, any muscle that goes over 2 joints, we're going to have to stabilize the top joint for the bottom joint to come up and get a better contraction. So something to think about is that a bone or the least stable bone will always move to the most stable bone. So that's why it's important to create stabilization through whichever joint that you're not trying to target. So for example, we know that our quads, one of our quads called the rectus femoris, starts up in our hip, goes all the way down and inserts onto our tibia. We also know that we have 3 more that run down our quad, or that make up our quads, and we have our vastus lateralis, lateral outside. We have our medialis that runs in there, and we have our intermedius that runs underneath these 2 here that you can't quite see and sits in under there, and they all attach onto the patella and then insert there. So what's that mean for us? Well, the rectus femoris, the one that we're after, what we know is that a muscle that goes over 2 joints won't contract as hard if they are made to contract both joints. So for a great example of this is our wrist. If we contract here and then try and contract our fist, we can't get a nice tight ball. But if we then have a straight wrist and contract nice and hard through our hand, that we can get a nice tight contraction. So the same process occurs with our quad, isn't it? If I'm all the way up here and contracted at this point here of the quads, I can't fully extend my leg. But if I allow myself some room, I can extend all the way out. So that's how we want to set our rest up, our back rest up already, and that we want to be in a reclined position and opening that joint up. Number 2 setup point is that we actually want to make sure that these pads are not rested on our ankle joint, because that's another joint that we have to combat and put in play. So we're going to sit them just above our ankle joint and just above here. So now we're able to get full dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion of our ankle joint, which will lock it up and also have a greater play in our quads, allowing a greater contraction. So let's talk about the execution of the lift now. Right, so I spoke a little bit earlier about stabilization. We have an acronym that we want to make sure that we adhere to each time we lift, and that is the acronym step by step, rep by rep, or STEP is the acronym. We want our first rep to look like our last rep. In order to do that, we need to tick off these 4 points. Point number 1 is stabilization. So what do I need to stabilize here? Well, 1, we need to stabilize the ankle joint. So all we're going to do is we're going to pull our feet up and rest up against our pads, all right? So that's nice and tight. And they're stable because of the dorsiflexion that has occurred. So plantar flexion is like planting down, dorsiflexion is pulling our foot up. So that's number 1. Number 2, well, our knee joint's pretty stable because they're up against the pad here, and they're not quite going anywhere. But we have one more joint at play, and that's our hips. Now, what I want you to do when you execute this lift is you're actually going to squeeze your glutes together, and you'll notice that when you do that, your quads will roll from straight up and down to outside. Now, what tends to happen with people who have issues with this exercise is that because we sit here without our quads, without our glutes on, all the load transfers into our vastus medialis and creates patella, or it gets tighter and tracks our patella slightly to the right. The issue with knee issues, majority of the time, is patella tracking. So our patella is designed to slide up and over like this in a groove. Now, if we then get a tight muscle, what happens is that instead of tracking over nice and smoothly like so, we pull over to the right or the left, and that is where the pain comes from. So in order to protect ourselves from that, what we want to do is we want to squeeze our glutes, put our toes to the sky, and you'll notice that we'll roll out. This will then start to engage our vastus lateralis a great deal more. So we squeeze our glutes on, point our toes to the sky, and recline back to open up this joint. From here, we're going to come up, squeeze hard, back down. Come up, squeeze hard, back down. And you'll notice you'll have full control over your quads, and at any point, you'll be able to stop. Now, what's going to happen is when you fatigue, you're going to want to roll in. You're going to want to come in and loosen off these glutes. As soon as you do that, that's when we can start to get ourselves in some strife, and you're probably ego lifting. So we need to lower the weight, or we need to stop at that particular point in time. So again, let's tick off all the markers. 1, point our toes to the sky. Number 2, we're going to squeeze our glutes on. Number 3, we're going to recline and open our hips up. Number 4, we're also going to pull our shoulder blades back and down. Keep that nice and tight, lock ourselves nice and in, and then it's all it is. It's just extension through our quads, squeeze hard at the top, get as much of the contraction as you can. And that there, team, is how you go about executing a stationary leg extension.